Velkomnir kæri gestir, ánægilegt að koma hér saman í dag og í tilefni af 60 ára afmæli Fulbright stofnunarinnar á Íslandi og að heyra frá styrkþeganum okkar, Guðmundi Steingrímsssyni, sem tiltölulega nýkominn heim frá rannsóknardvöl í Bandaríkjunum. Og viðburðurinn fer fram á ensku og ég ætla núna að skipta yfir. So dear guests, I welcome you to this Fulbright Forum on the occasion of our 69th anniversary. A year when we are also actually celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States signing the Declaration of Independence. And what better way to celebrate than to hear from a recently returned Icelandic visiting student researcher who is working on a fascinating PhD project and who just completed his Fulbright or his grant at the end of 2025 at Yale University. I want to just say a few words about the Visiting Student Researcher Program. It allows PhD students in Iceland to spend between 4 and 12 months at a university or institution in the US to conduct part of their dissertation research, to work with advisors, take specialized courses that aren't offered here in Iceland. And many of our VSR grantees have also had access to specialized research facilities during their time in the US, which has been invaluable to their research. Fulbright Iceland strives to meet the needs of higher education institutions in Iceland, and it became apparent a few years ago that opportunities were lacking for PhD students in Iceland to build relationships in the US, to gain those valuable insights at top-notch universities and to collaborate on their research. So we listened to the concerns of university leadership and responded with an addition to our student grant program, the Visiting Student Research Grant for PhD students. And the first Icelandic VSR grantees went to the US in the spring of 2021. And to date, 13 Icelandic PhD students have been able to achieve their dream of PhD study and research in the US through Fulbright. I think that's pretty good in these few years. We're going to hear from one of them here today. Guðmundur Steingrímsson is a PhD student in the Environment and Natural Resources program at the University of Iceland, working on a dissertation on the circular economy. He received his VSR grant to spend a semester at the Center for Industrial Ecology at Yale University. It's a fascinating and timely topic. I'm sure we're in for a stimulating discussion. I want to note that we are live on Zoom, and for those who can't be here in person, and let me note also that we are recording. We will take questions after the presentation, so if you want to ask questions virtually, you can type your questions into Zoom. For those who are here in person, we're going to have some refreshments at the end of the presentation. So that's, I think, all from me. Guðmundur, we can't wait to hear about your work and your time at Yale, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Such a pleasure to be here and then celebrating the anniversary of Fulbright in Iceland. And I have some connection to I think the establishing of the Fulbright Commission in Iceland, because I believe my grandfather was the prime minister here when the agreement was made. And I'm very happy to be in this house because my first job when I was a 12-year-old was in this house. There was the Icelandic Research Fund was here, and my father was the manager of it, and I got to be a delivery boy running errands around town with envelopes before the internet. So I was the internet of the Icelandic Research Fund. So today I'm just going to speak about my research and talk about what I was doing at Yale, and such a great opportunity that I was given by again this Fulbright grant, and this is really the exceptional place to be for my research. The School of Environment at Yale. I think it's he's one of the oldest institution in environmental studies in the States and maybe in the world. And there's such a abundance of knowledge on my field there, so that this was a extremely valuable opportunity for me. So I'm gonna, here you see one of my fundamental achievements that I got. I'm not very skillful in PowerPoint, but I learned to do this. You saw this?
You have to teach me.
Yeah. It's just, I would like to say that this was the only thing I was doing at Yale. Just, make this having going circle. I'm so proud of this, But here's another circle. Just, to give you the context of what I'm dealing with and what I'm researching and all those scientists that are occupied with the circular economy. So what is the problem? We have one Earth, and the extraction of resources, raw materials from nature is clearly unsustainable, and this has been, ever since the limits of growth was published in 1972, this has been known, although we keep finding new resources, but it's still unsustainable. It's over 100 billion tons of raw material annually, which is 12.5 tons per capita of human being on Earth annually. And consumption of raw materials grows much faster than the population. So just 2% growth of consumption, it doubles the consumption in 35 years, just to give you a context. It's just simple maths. And this leads to all kinds of damage on nature, loss of biodiversity, and loss of ecosystems, and so on, because there's a lot of heavy machinery and so on to do all this mining and get all those raw materials from Earth. Gigantic emissions, around approximately 50% of global emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, just is because of our extraction of resources, raw materials, and so on. So there's a lot at stake to kind of decouple our growth, our welfare from the extraction of resources. So my research, and this is me I got a really fine small office in the Center of Industrial Ecology, in a very inspiring kind of atmosphere, and I got a blackboard in front of my computer, and I was really thinking about what to write on the blackboard. It's such an inviting space, you have to write something, and I was really thinking about writing something profound that would inspire me, but I ended up just writing focus. Just focus, and it worked. So I managed to actually finish 2 scientific articles there, and this simple message really did the job. And so my basic questions are just, what does circularity mean? What are we talking about? This is a concept that is kind of all over the place, the circular economy. We have to know what we are referring to. So my philosophy background comes in handy when I was studying. I have a master's degree in philosophy of language, semantics, and so on, where I'm really interested in also just the meaning of words and how we use them. So, and also, given that we know what we mean, is the circular economy happening? Can we see it somewhere? Is it something that we are doing? And how can we measure it? If you know what we mean by it, can we somehow put some measurement stick on, are we progressing towards circular economy? And how can we strengthen it then? If we know, if we can measure it, how can we empower the circular economy? And I use Iceland as a case study, which is kind of convenient because Iceland is this island, and we know what comes into the island and so on, and what we import, and it's a clear overview of the materials that we consume. And here are some photos just to prove that I was there. And this is it was a really nice weather until October and so on. I even went to the beach and so on. So I had sunglasses. This is in front of the Yale School of Environment. This is a house that was built. It's got a lot of awards for sustainability and so on in 2009. This is my supervisor in Yale, Barbara Rack. This is a senior researcher at the Industrial Ecology Center, and she has agreed to be a co-author of one of my articles, and also she has now agreed to be on my doctoral committee. So I'm really, really pleased. And I got to experience some really nice habits and cultures and so on in the States, like Halloween. And of course I was a Viking, obviously. My friend was there. And this is the director of the Center of Industrial Ecology, Marian Chertow. She invited me to Hanukkah celebration and so on. And I also got to experience Thanksgiving. This was really delightful with my family there because I have a family in the States. Well, this is the Center of Industrial Ecology. I had a really nice time at Yale, and it was such an eye-opening, inspiring experience just to feel this energy that is at an institution like this. So much going on, all those lectures and so on, and so much knowledge, and well, it was really like turbocharging my research. Okay, so I'm just gonna tell you what I have discovered. So this is kind of another circle here. This is the circular economy. What we mean by it in a figure. So you have raw materials coming in from nature. We design something. We produce something. We distribute it, consume it. Then we throw it away in its collection. Hopefully, we recycle it. And we try to diminish this stream. We are aiming for zero waste. So we can narrow this stream. We aim for just going in a circle. And along the way, the design stage is really important because we have to design things in products in such a way that we can use them again. And also the production stage and so on, reproducing. And we have to, in the conception stage, we can do a lot of things like reusing. Again, we can create a circle here, repair. It's a lot of repairing that we do. And obviously here, we need to use the material again, and so on. But so, sounds kind of simple. But the circular economy, as I see it, is a kind of a toolbox. It has many different tools, all with the aim of reducing our extraction of raw materials, use materials again. And in English, conveniently, we refer to the R words. It's all recycle, reuse, repair, and those. And there are like 39, almost 40 R words have been counted in the literature. So this is all over the place. So like reservice, resell, resale, repurpose. A lot of this, of course, overlap and so on. But in literature, there's so much that's been written about circular economy. And so you get kind of confused, what are we talking about? Replacement, remanufacture, and so on. So I have, in my studies, I have mostly been focusing on recycling, reusing, that is some other, repairing, and recycle, and reuse, repair, recycle, and reduce. This is really important, of course, just trying to reduce at the start what we use. So, in my research, I have, like the first question, are we doing those things? Is the circular economy somewhere? So I looked at Iceland and started with reducing. Are Icelanders reducing things? Maybe not under the banner of circular economy, but still is some reduction going on. And there are some obvious examples, much less fossil fuels in this society than elsewhere. approximately 90% is renewables, and this just from the mid 20th century onwards, we have steadfastly been reducing fossil fuels. Not thinking about circular economy necessarily, but still, this is an example, a glorious example of the circular economy in action, really. And there are like this, less paper use, obviously because of less newspapers. So, and the reason is often not, not always good, but digitalization and so on has introduced less demand for paper. So there you have it, reduction there. There's less consumption of red meat and dairy. So if you're speaking about food in terms of circular economy, we have to diminish our impact on nature. And they're all indications, all researches point to the fact that the most impact comes from consumption of red meat and dairy. And Icelanders have actually, then again, not necessarily thinking about the circular economy, but because of some lifestyle changes and so on, have been reducing red meat and dairy. There's less increase in car ownership. Car ownership is very common in Iceland. There's a lot of cars, but it has been slowing. Don't know why, but it's an example. There's less buying of electronics per capita in recent years. My research shows that. I don't know why, but less buying of clothing per capita. Still a lot, but there's some slowing going on. So, I asked the question, is something happening? Because like the circular economy and all this environmental emphasis and so on is relatively new. Like the circular economy is first mentioned in 2012 in the Parliament of Iceland. In 2015, it kind of starts to grow, and then we have new laws concerning the circular economy in 2021. Maybe this is working. So, and I looked at reusing. There are obvious examples there. Not necessarily that we think of the circular economy there, but we constantly, of course, we reuse vehicles. There's a huge market with used vehicles, obviously, because they are expensive. So there's an economic incentive not to throw away your car after you use it. But I'm not. This is just something that we can remind us of. That the vehicle market is almost like a sharing economy. Like 22% of cars change ownership every year. And houses are obviously reused as well. We don't throw away our houses after we use them. And actually constructions and buildings, that's around half of all the materials that comes into the country. So this is really important, what we do with the houses. Do we renovate the houses? Do we repair them? Do we maintain them in good shape and so on? It has a really large impact on our material consumption. There's increasing sales of used electronics, not high numbers there, but still increasing. And there's increasing revenue also of second-hand clothing stores. We see them popping up. Still small numbers, but there's an increase there. So there are some lifestyle changes going on. We obviously repair a lot of things. It's really, again, vehicles, they're repaired. There's a law in this country that we need to repair our vehicles. Houses are obviously repaired. There's increasing repairs of electronics, increasing repairs of clothing as well. So there are some nice indications that we are not, totally lost. And recycling, there's a lot of emphasis within the circular economy on recycling. Some people just think that the circular economy is only about recycling bins and so on. And there's really been made a lot of progress there. The recycling rate of collected cars, steel, electronics, paper, and construction waste is almost 100%. But the key there is collected. There's a lot of electronics that's just sitting around in drawers in households and so on that is still not collected. And bio-waste is increasingly recycled. This is an excellent example of really good lawmaking in action. Some people say that we should not, demand of people to do things and so on, and we should not have rules like this, but we have this law in 2021, just, saying that it's not allowed anymore to throw away bio-waste, to landfill it. It's not allowed. And immediately we got results. Now it's around 90% recycled. Well, this works. If the population is ready for it, then just go ahead. But there's still a long way to go. The material footprint of Iceland is large. There's increasing consumption in recent decade, although I was just looking at the last few years. There's a lot of plastic packaging, and textiles are a big issue. There's a lot of problem with textiles. And houses are getting bigger in volume. That's really interesting. I don't think we are getting bigger, but the houses are getting bigger. So we need more space. And we also see this in cars. They are getting bigger. I was just, parking my car here, and you see like 20-year-old parking spaces that are just too small. So things are getting bigger, and that needs more raw materials. But as I was going through, we are still doing a lot, but maybe not realizing it. So I maintain, because I'm always also considering, how do we get out the message? How do we get people to do more things, to be more environmentally conscious and so on. So I think this is kind of a tone that needs to be there. We need to remind people of the things that they are doing. It should be obvious to people that cars are recycled and so on. And so let's do it to other things also. Also, and brings me to the two scientific articles, papers that I wrote in Yale. We need to understand better what we need to do and what the task is. So we need to get behind the numbers. I did before I went to Yale. I had conducted 13 interviews with importers of materials in Iceland, and I focused on 13 types of materials. In this, the task was to find out what do they talk about when they talk about the circular economy. What does it mean in their perception? So I looked at importer of plastics for manufacturing vehicles, clothing, aluminium, and paper, steel, building supplies, electronics, and so forth. And I found out that they talk about, they have this basic conception of circular economy, that this is some kind of a loop, materials go in a loop, and they very much think about recycling. But going deeper, I discovered, kind of in alignment with some themes in the literature, that there isn't one circular economy. There are many economies, at least 4, so depending on what kind of a material we are talking about. So the circular economy and the policies that we need to implement and strengthen the circular economy, they need to be material specific, obviously. And so we have the closing economy, which is all about just closing the loop. And many metals like steel, aluminum, they can be recycled endlessly, all over again. So this is all about just, using those materials again and again and again. But growth is an issue here, because we always need more steel that we have available. The used steel is not enough for us, so we always need more. So that's a particular kind of circular economy with particular kind of problems. The regenerative economy. This is about, biomass, timber, food, paper. The biomass, like food, it kind of doesn't fit into the circular economy very well, because you have an apple and you eat the apple and the apple grows again. So the key question there is the apple grown with sustainable measures. Is it grown with the regenerative methods? So does it leave nature as it is, or maybe even and better it? So those are the questions that we are facing when we produce biomass. Like timber, all the timber in Iceland is imported and extracted from sustainable forestry. So that should be circular economy then, but it isn't kind of in the literature, but it's regenerative. So we have the regenerative economy. And this is all about, the major obstacle there is a lack of information. Like when it comes to food, there's an immense difference between coffee and coffee. You can have coffee that is grown regenerative, in a regenerative way, leaving nature, in better shape, and you can have awful coffee. And we can actually use a lot of our carbon footprint with particular kind of dark chocolate. But there's all the dark chocolate that's really good. So we have to have this information to be able to make those choices. What is, regenerative there? And then we have the narrow economy. This is all about the matters that we are trying to reduce. It's all about reducing, narrowing the stream. This is like cement. There's thousands of researchers and scientists trying to lessen the need for cement. We need to replace cement somehow. It's really kind of energy intensive, a lot of emissions in producing cement. Fossil fuels, obviously. So, and single-use plastics. And then we have the slowing economy. This is all about, on the consumption stage, where we can repair things and use them longer. And it's all about durability, buy clothing that is really durable and so on. And this is, the materials there are like electronics, vehicles, clothing. Vehicles are actually becoming more durable, like in Iceland, numbers show that. So, there we have that. And how can we measure this? There's one, and this is actually an article that I wrote entirely in Yale. The EU uses the circular materials use rate. It's really simple. It just says how much is coming into the economy from resources and from imports, just in tons, and how much is recycled, and how much is brought in of secondary materials and so on. And they just, then it's just, the percentage. So like the average percentage of recycled materials in the consumption in Europe is 11%. I did like an analysis of Iceland, not with the same method, but similar. In my master's thesis, I found out that this percentage circular use rate of Iceland was 8.5%, but with slightly different methods. But now I did this again, and yes, it's just the share of materials that goes into the economy again. It's really kind of recycled based and so on, and 11%, and the goal is 22%. So I ask, can Iceland reach this goal of 22% and just on this simple index? And I found out that this is really a simple measurement for a much complicated reality, but still, the simpleness is of a value. And Iceland, 2024, I looked at this. From nature, we took like 3,000 kilotons. This is what we extract from nature, mostly wild fish, grass and hay and the sand and gravel and so on. We imported this number, 5,500 something kilotons, all kinds of materials. We exported mostly fish and aluminium, 2,400. So the domestic consumption is just, imports and extraction from nature minus exports, which is this, 16 tons per capita. It's high. And the waste was, the total waste number was this, and of which was recycled 347 kilotons. The recycling was kind of split into composted and reused and recycled just. So the total domestic consumption with this number and this number, because this goes into the consumption again, is this. So the circular material use rate for Iceland is 5.2%. It's very low because we have this high consumption apparently. But here I maintain we have to look behind the numbers. You know, we have to know the peculiarity of the Icelandic situation. You know, can we actually increase this? And I found out I had like 6 scenarios trying to find out what if we would cut our consumption of electronics and cement and clothing by half. It had almost no effect. Didn't matter. What if we just stopped altogether using fossil fuels? It increases this to 5.8, I think. So nothing happening. No kind of result from really ambitious environmental goals if we would reach them. So what is happening with Iceland? What materials are we actually consuming? And can those materials be circular? Are we just stuck in some kind of dilemma here? And interesting, when I looked at this, I think maybe we are 2 of us who have been looking at all the list of all materials that Iceland imports annually, and I becoming kind of a nerd in this. So 70% of the consumption in Iceland is in 6 types of materials. And what materials are those? It's oxygen released from aluminium smelting. It's 30% of our consumption. And this is obviously not something that is going in a circle. This is just, we bring in bauxite or alumina for the production of aluminum. And in the process, smelting it, the oxygen releases, and it combines with carbon, unfortunately, and so it's CO2. That is a separate problem. That is obviously something that we need to regulate and try to find methods not to release it so much, but it's just oxygen. So oxygen is 30% of the Icelandic consumption. This is not what we are talking about when we are talking about the circular economy. So we should somehow, just put this into a bracket, and deal with this separately. This is a kind of a residual industrial process. Fossil fuels, that is, of course, something that we are trying to get rid of. But that's 30% of our consumption, and we still need to address that. Rocks for constructions. I mean, rocks are really heavy, and we have eruptions in Grindavík, and we need to move a lot of rocks and build like, those, what do you call it, varnargarðar.
Barriers.
Yeah, barriers for the lava and so on, and then that brings that like those. So 12% of our consumption is rocks, and that is not something that we are kind of talking about when you're talking about the circular economy. Of course, we need to have some environmental regulations around it and so on, but it's not a circular issue. Sand and gravel for constructions, 12%. So we are just, like 24% is just rock, sand, and gravel that we are moving around. And still, again, need to emphasize, we need to have some environmental concerns about it, of course, but it's not something that we are talking about when we are talking about the circular. And then we have animal feed from nature. It's grass and hay. It's 11%. So that is, of course, something that we need to think about, obviously. But this is biomass. The grass grows again. So if it is sustainable and if it is regenerative, it should be okay. And of course, we have issues concerning land use and so on. But doesn't fit into what we are talking about when we are talking about the circular economy, in my view. So, and this is interesting. 10% of the consumption is just water from fish. We have wild fish catch. We have like the second biggest fisheries nation in Europe, I think, after Norway. So, I mean, there's a huge amount of fish that comes into the economy and out again. It comes in for kind of minor processing, like freezing and so on. And we freeze it, and then it loses weight. It loses water. And there are also some processing remains, something that we don't eat and don't use and so on, intestines, but mostly water. So this is 10% of our consumption. Then again, this is not something that we need to be concerned about. when we be concerned about it, but not when we talk about circular economy. So in total, those materials are 70% of the consumption of Icelanders. This is something I maintain we need to know before we continue, implementing the circular economy. This like when we talk about Icelanders as this heavy consuming nation, like 16 tons per capita, we need to know this. If we exclude this, maybe not fossil fuels, we go down to 5 tons per capita. It's a totally different picture. And if we correct our measurements of the circular economy, then we actually have a different picture. We can actually reach the EU target. We need to take out this peculiarity into account. When we take the oxygen, the water, and the stones, not the fossil fuels, out of the equation, we have a circular material use rate that is 11.6%. If we manage to build a society with no fossil fuels at all, we are trying to do that. We are dealing with transportation, aviation, and vessels, and land transportation. We would increase now our circular use rate up to 16. It will now be 16.5%. So that's a realistic target. With increased recycling along in line with the goals that the EU has made, we could reach 18.3. With less cement, clothing, and electronics, it's something that we are always striving to do, and we are kind of doing it, but we need to be more conscious about it. We can actually reach 22%. So if we correct our measurements, if we look behind the numbers, the target becomes realistic. And that concludes my research. That what I was doing at Yale, I was not only trying to make the heading go into a circle in PowerPoint, as I managed to do, and now this is kind of the conclusion. We have to empower the good existing habits that we are already kind of doing, and also get behind the numbers for defining goals that really matter, and then we can make some progress. Thank you very much.
I'm sure, don't take a seat because I'm sure there are questions. Yeah.
Okay, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much. I actually had 2 questions. One is, did you notice any other European countries, any other similarities in the peculiarities that would have prevented them from also reaching that 22% target? That's one question. And the other is, would you have concluded that Iceland's geographic location was the main driver behind those peculiarities?
Yeah, the first question, actually, I haven't seen another examples of European states, but I'm going to. That's the next thing I'm going to finish my article. I'm going to add a chapter to kind of increase the relevance of my research. I suspect that there are nations that are also dealing with peculiarities that makes kind of impossible for them to increase their circular use rate. So we have to, and Eurostat, that's the institution in the European Union that is concerned with those matters, has kind of acknowledged that we need to go behind the numbers and acknowledge those peculiarities. So my paper on this is kind of it's my contribution to that kind of issue. And the peculiarity of Iceland is, of course, it's kind of indirectly linked to the where we are on the globe. I mean, we have this immense waters around us with a lot of fish, and it has always been difficult to compare Iceland to any other nation when it comes to material flows and so on, because the wild fish catch is just so huge. So this is kind of a revelation, at least to me, how much the wild fish catch affects all the numbers, just because we bring it in and we freeze it, and then it loses weight and then it goes out. And so we need to kind of know this. And also, obviously, I mean, we have a lot of renewable energy, which is connected to our spot on the globe, because there's a lot of hot water, and this we have used this renewable energy to attract large aluminium companies, 3 of those, and they take around 70% of the energy, and they bring in such an abundance of alumina, bauxite. It's really kind of skews the picture for Iceland and so on, but not, so this is kind of indirectly affecting our numbers.
I'd like to ask, just with the measurements, looking at it, how there are so many factors in there that aren't relevant to the measurement. Doesn't the measurement then need to be changed in general? So that, or is that a slippery slope where everybody will start to make up things where, but we can't include this and we can't include that, or how do you see that evolve?
Yeah, it is tricky because, we all want to have simple measurements that everybody understands. And that is really what I was talking about here, the circular material use rate is really simple.
Yeah.
So we need to kind of preserve the simplicity of it. But again, we need to acknowledge, how peculiar some economies are, because otherwise the measurement is just of no use. If it is not corrected for Iceland, this measurement is of no use for Iceland. Hardly any environmental ambitious goal matters. So, and I was just, showing how obvious those reasons are. So you can make minor corrections. I thought maybe about, like we do in golf. You have this, people have different handicaps. Yeah, handicaps. So you have to introduce those for circularity of nations.
Thank you very much for good talk. One of these 6 high volume material was the oxygen that comes from the aluminum smelting. But then you said that binds with carbon. Yeah. So, and I mean CO2 is pretty bad. So exactly. I didn't get your arguments, why you should take that out.
Yeah, because the carbon actually is another stream that comes in as electrodes. That's is put into the combines with the bauxite. So you have to be careful not to, this is just the oxygen that goes up. So that's 30%. But the carbon comes in another way. So I was not talking about the carbon. It is it binds with the oxygen. And that is, of course, a problem because it leads to emissions. There's maybe a technology behind the corner, and with using for this process renewable energy, not carbon. So you wouldn't have to burn carbon. So then you would just release oxygen. But for my purposes, I'm just looking at material streams. This particular material stream just releases oxygen. There's another stream that comes in that binds to it, yes, but I was not, and that is still an issue. So, I mean, and we have to be careful, although I'm saying that this is not maybe something that we need to consider when we are talking about the circular economy. This is certainly something that we need to consider when we are talking about other things posing environmental problems and so on. This is really an issue for emission, obviously.
Is 22% good enough target? Or is it ambitious enough?
Yeah, well, maybe not.
In America?
But this is just something that the EU has said, and so that's why I look at it, and it is really, I don't know if we can reach higher goals, but it would certainly be good. And the goal is to reach this before 2035, I think. So it's only in 9 years, but it's really optimistic. But no, but yeah, maybe it is possible. There's like we need to focus really on like construction. So what we do with those, that is really like 50% of all the materials that come into the country are for construction. And that's like really the biggest issue.
Well, I have one more question. So when we talk about like appliances and electronics and all of that, that's all more or less imported to
Yeah.
Iceland, right? And I, in the old days, you bought an appliance and it lasted for 15 years.
Yeah.
Now companies make them purposely to last much shorter,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that seems to be in total contradiction to what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And there are only very few brands that actually still, like Miele or something, that they make their appliances to last. The others are, of course, much less expensive.
Yeah.
The ones that you buy and then renew every 10 years or something. So what does that matter? I mean, the appliances, are they a big part of this? And how do we then, I mean, is it through legislation, through tax incentives, or what do we do to try to because obviously if they could do it 50 years ago, they could do it now. They just don't want to,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Because it doesn't make sense for them economically.
No.
So, yeah.
But what makes sense to them,
Yeah.
if they can make durable tools that they can then rent out. So renting as a business model is really good for electronics. So I think like the importers that I interviewed, those who are in the business of importing electronics and tools and so on, they are very much thinking about, increasing the durability with repair services and renting out the tools, because that would actually be a really good business model for them, because you have this long-term relationship with the customer and so on, and you can get more money from each equipment. So it makes sense. The business model makes sense. And actually also legislation is coming. The EU has this right to repair regulation directive that needs approval from the EU, the member states, but it's coming up, demanding that those who are producing or manufacturing tools or electronics and so on and equipment, that it should always be designed in such a way that you can repair it. There's a major issue there is also education. There's a lack of skillful workforce for repairing all those kind of complicated machinery and tools and so on.
Thanks for a very informative talk. Learned a lot of new things today. I was just wondering if this isn't a little bit too simplified, because we're only thinking about one country, Iceland, and don't you need to have it more global? I was just thinking 1 kilo of rock is not quite the same as 1 kilo of iPhones.
No.
It's like it's the effect on the whole world that we're thinking about. I mean, even if we take one rock from the ground and do something with it, doesn't really affect many people. But 1 kilo of iPhones affects a lot of people.
Exactly. Then again, there's always this question of, what can simple measurements tell you? And what do you lose when you complicate them? You lose kind of transparency. We know this. We are talking about tons, weights. When I did my analysis in the master's thesis, I looked at like raw material equivalents. How much material did go into the process of making the thing? Then you have totally different numbers. Like the iPhone is very making an iPhone is very probably water intensive, energy intensive, and you have a lot of rare earth materials and so on. And so that is kind of accounted for in that process, but it's really complicated and not transparent. If we lose that, you really kind of don't know what you are measuring anymore. So the simplicity of just talking about, weight, tons, kind of tells you more, but you have to take things into account. Like, for example, the rocks, sand and gravel and so on. Yours that doesn't acknowledge the reuse of sand and gravel for construction as recycling, because it totally skews the picture if you bring that in as well. Then, so already there's an acknowledgement of, not talking about rocks because they're so heavy and they're obviously, well, we have concerns about them, but not from a circular perspective. Yeah, but this is always what we are, dealing with, simplicity versus, maybe more accurate picture of what is going on. But, we also need to have more measurements. Like example, this measurement that I was talking about, it doesn't exactly grasp the importance of reuse within the economy or repairing and so on. So it's really difficult to measure those. How much are we reusing? And it would be so interesting to know, how much textiles, clothing are we keeping in our closets? And are we using those? I would really want to know those things,
If we would take the gravel and the rocks that we put around Grindavík and move it again next year, 2027, would it still count into this?
I don't know. There's a rule in the accounting of this that I think there's a certain material stream of rocks that is only moved short distances that is not included in any of this. So it's a kind of matter of distance there. But so that's why I just this is my proposal is just we should exclude rocks, sand, and all this just entirely from this equation.
One micro case is that we are extracting a lot of rocks and gravel from Reykjavik city, and we transport it all to Borðalda and Grímsfell instead of putting it in the ocean here or something to make more landfills.
Yeah,
it's a lot of
movement,
a lot of diesel and this
of course. But then again, obviously environmental issues concerning this, but there are different kinds of issues.
Yeah, well, I don't think we have time to delve into this topic today.
Just very short question.
Let's.
Just very short question.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Did you get in some garage music band so you could survive in a Christian country?
No, I didn't.
You did.
That's a good final question. I want to thank you, Guðmundur, for coming. It's a little Fulbright gift for you.
Yeah, thank you.
For coming and sharing your knowledge with us today. I think we should just give him a round of applause. I mean, it's fascinating, and I think that all of us learned something that we didn't know. I think everybody can speak for all of us to say that. It's been really good. And we look forward to seeing your dissertation when are you?
Hopefully a year.
Hopefully in a year. Great. We'll be looking for that. So I want to thank everybody in our audience as well. Both those who are in person and those who came virtually. And just to note that the BSR program has become an important part of what we do here at the Commission and has proven to be an invaluable resource for our PhD students here in Iceland who have received this grant. And we are really proud to be able to offer standout candidates like Guðmundur the opportunity to spend time at some of the world's most prestigious universities, right? I want to thank you for applying to the Fulbright program and again for sharing this with us today. Those of you who are staying with us, we're going to have some refreshments, but before we do that, I just want to note that we do have some additional presentations coming up. We are going to have a couple of presentations now in March, both in music and in innovation as well. And we also have a very exciting project coming up at the end, towards the end of the month. I'm not going to say much about it here, but it's a gospel music project that we're doing as our feature America 250 project, where we're bringing over US specialists, and we'll be working with an Icelandic choir and musicians here in Iceland. And we hope that all of you will be starting to advertise that at the beginning of the month. And we hope that we will see you all there. It's going to be a free event. And there's also going to be a talk at the University of Iceland on the traditions and history of gospel music. So we look forward to seeing you at some of these events that are coming up. And until then, let's continue to forge a better future with Fulbright. Thank you all.